What happens when the woman who once walked into Buckingham Palace thinking she could rewrite the rules of royalty suddenly walks into a television studio and meets the one woman who refuses to play along? Picture it. A bright New York morning, the stage lights of The View flickering to life, and an uninvited figure striding toward the table where Whoopi Goldberg and her co-hosts sit. The cameras are rolling. The audience is clapping, then hesitates. And just as Meghan Markle opens her mouth to speak, Whoopi turns, levels that unmistakable gaze, and says 5 words that slice through the tension like glass. "You need to step down, sweetheart." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The crowd freezes. The crew looks stunned. And somewhere in that charged silence, a career that once seemed unstoppable starts to crumble. But how did it come to this? How did Meghan, former actress, former duchess, self-styled philanthropist, reach the point where she would try to climb onto one of America's most guarded stages, only to be publicly told to leave? And why did Whoopi, of all people, become the one to draw the line? To understand the gravity of that moment, you have to rewind. Not just to the headlines about Meghan's fading Hollywood glow or the countless PR reinventions, but to the deeper question lingering underneath. Why is the world that once crowned her a global icon now turning away? Because this wasn't simply about a television appearance. This was about image, reputation, and a woman desperate to reclaim relevance, only to be reminded, brutally, that the audience decides who belongs in the spotlight. Let's be honest, Meghan's re-entry into American media hasn't exactly been smooth sailing. There were whispers in the corridors of Netflix long before the ink on her contract dried. Creative differences, they called it when the deal started collapsing. Then came the Spotify split, public, messy, and humiliating. Industry insiders called her podcast too controlled, too polished, too self-centered. The kind of criticism that cuts deeper than a gossip headline. Every attempt to reshape her image seemed to backfire, leaving her more isolated, more misunderstood, and, perhaps worst of all, more predictable. So when word spread that Meghan was trying to appear on The View, eyebrows shot up everywhere. Not because guest spots are unusual, but because of where she was trying to sit. Not as a guest, as a co-host. Yes, a co-host. Imagine the audacity. It wasn't just another interview. It was an attempted takeover of one of the most opinionated stages in daytime television. And that, as Whoopi would soon make clear, was a line that couldn't be crossed. But before we get to the confrontation, the live, unscripted moment that no one could edit or spin, we need to step into Meghan's mindset. Because for her, this wasn't simply about publicity. It was survival. After years of being portrayed as manipulative or opportunistic, she needed to prove she still had the charm, the poise, the relevance to command a room full of powerful women. And what better place to do that than on The View, a platform built on sharp opinions and fearless conversation. Still, even Meghan should have known, Whoopi Goldberg doesn't yield her microphone to anyone. Think about Whoopi for a second. She's not just a talk show host. She's a cultural institution, an EGOT winner, a civil rights advocate, a woman who spent decades saying what others are afraid to say. When she speaks, people listen, not because she's loud, but because she's real. And for someone like Meghan, who's built her post-royal image on curated interviews, polished statements, and tightly managed appearances, that kind of unfiltered authenticity can be dangerous. Which brings us back to that morning. It started innocently enough, or at least that's what the studio thought. Audience members were already seated, chatting excitedly as the theme music swelled. Joy Behar was cracking jokes. Sunny Hostin was reviewing cue cards. Then came the stir near the entrance. A flash of dark hair, tailored white blazer, and an unmistakable air of confidence. Meghan Markle had arrived. No announcement. No official introduction. Just that trademark smile. The one that used to melt red carpets and magazine covers alike. At first, the audience reacted with applause. Familiar face, celebrity charm, it made sense. But the energy shifted quickly when Meghan didn't stop at the guest chair. She walked straight toward the table reserved for hosts. For Whoopi. For the women who built that platform from years of credibility and controversy. The producers froze. The director whispered into his headset. And in the control room, someone mouthed the words, "Is this planned?" It wasn't. Meghan placed her hands on the back of an empty chair. The moment stretched. Whoopi glanced at the crew, then at Meghan. The expression on her face wasn't anger, it was disbelief. The kind of quiet disbelief that says, "You really didn't think this through, did you?" And when Whoopi finally spoke, her voice was calm but absolute. "You need to step down, sweetheart. This isn't your show." The words hit like thunder. Meghan blinked, smiled awkwardly, tried to laugh it off. But laughter couldn't fix what had just happened. Because that wasn't just Whoopi setting a boundary. It was the industry drawing a line in the sand. The cameras cut to commercial, but the damage was done. The moment spread online within hours. Clips, captions, reactions. People replayed the footage, dissected Whoopi's tone, Meghan's expression, the stunned faces of the audience. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was a public reckoning. And this is where the real story begins. Because behind the scenes, long before that viral moment, a quiet battle had already been brewing. Meghan had been reaching out to American networks, pitching herself as the voice of modern womanhood. ABC executives had hesitated. Too much baggage, they said. But Meghan's team kept pushing, hinting that an appearance on The View would soften her image. The problem? No one had cleared it with Whoopi. And on The View, you don't just walk in uninvited. You earn your seat, or you don't sit at all. Why does this matter now? Because it reveals something deeper than just celebrity drama. It's a mirror held up to fame itself, to the way the public can love someone fiercely one year and turn on them the next. It's about control, authenticity, and what happens when you build a brand on perfection in a world that craves imperfection. And maybe, just maybe, it's about the limits of reinvention. How many times can someone rebrand before the world stops believing them? Whoopi Goldberg's reaction wasn't personal, it was cultural. A generation of women watching saw something symbolic in that exchange. The mentor figure standing her ground against the relentless wave of curated, image-driven fame. The audience didn't cheer because they hated Meghan. They cheered because they recognized truth. Because for once, someone said out loud what millions had been whispering for years. You don't get to control every narrative. Still, the irony is rich. Meghan once thrived on narrative. She knew how to craft it, shape it, deliver it perfectly. From actress to duchess, from duchess to media mogul, it was a masterclass in public storytelling. But in that one unscripted moment, all the PR in the world couldn't protect her. You could almost see it in her eyes, the realization that this time, there was no editing room, no sympathetic interviewer, no safety net. And that's what makes this story so captivating. It's raw, unfiltered. It strips away the glossy sheen of celebrity and exposes the human vulnerability beneath. Because no matter how powerful, how famous, how rehearsed someone becomes, there's always that moment when reality bites back. And that's exactly what happened here. The aftermath was immediate. Social media erupted. Half the internet defending Whoopi for keeping it real. The other half accusing her of humiliating another woman on national television. But beneath the hashtags and debates, a subtler narrative emerged. People weren't just talking about the clash itself. They were asking what it meant. What does it say about authenticity? About entitlement? About the fine line between confidence and arrogance? Maybe that's why this story is stuck. It's not just about a celebrity being told off. It's about power meeting its reflection and not liking what it sees. Meghan's life has been defined by control. Controlling her image, her story, her surroundings. But control only works when people agree to believe in it. And on that morning, Whoopi refused to play along. She broke the spell. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that authenticity still matters. The tension didn't end with that commercial break. Far from it. Because when the cameras stopped rolling, a storm began to brew behind the scenes. Arguments, phone calls, statements being drafted. ABC's PR team scrambled to frame the situation before it spiraled. Meghan's representatives prepared a response that, as always, sounded polished, sympathetic, and victimized. Yet the truth was simpler. Meghan had miscalculated. She underestimated Whoopi's instinct for self-preservation and overestimated her own influence. Still, there's another layer to this. Why would Meghan even attempt something so risky? The answer, perhaps, lies in desperation. The kind of desperation that grows when fame begins to slip through your fingers. After all, the Hollywood world that once welcomed her now watches cautiously. Her name doesn't guarantee ratings anymore. It guarantees debate, controversy. And for a woman who built her empire on charm, that's a dangerous shift. It's easy to forget how powerful that charm once was. Meghan could command attention with a glance, a phrase, a well-timed anecdote. But fame is fickle. One minute you're a symbol of change, the next, you're a cautionary tale. And in Meghan's case, the transition happened faster than anyone expected. The public that once celebrated her rebellion against royal tradition now sees her as a symbol of overexposure. So when she tried to join The View, people didn't see a confident woman. They saw someone forcing her way back into relevance. The irony is that Meghan and Whoopi are not so different. Both fought against stereotypes. Both rose through determination and charisma. But where Whoopi embraced her flaws, Meghan tried to erase hers. And that's why, when their paths finally crossed, it felt like a collision of worlds. Authenticity versus control, truth versus performance. And maybe that's why the moment hit so hard. It wasn't just about two women on a stage. It was about an idea, the idea that you can shape perception forever, that reinvention has no limits. But every performance ends eventually, and when the curtain falls, the truth always steps forward. As the audience watched Meghan retreat from the stage, the silence said more than any applause could. Whoopi returned to her seat, the music resumed, and the show went on. But the energy had changed. Everyone in that studio knew they had witnessed something unforgettable. And what happened next, behind the scenes, online, in boardrooms and production meetings, would only make the fallout bigger, louder, and far more explosive. Because Meghan Markle had just been told to step down. But she wasn't about to step away. Not yet. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever seen a moment so unexpected, so charged, that time itself seemed to stop? That's exactly what happened inside the ABC studio that morning. The hum of audience chatter faded, the bright set lights suddenly felt colder, and every camera operator froze mid-motion. What began as an ordinary live taping of The View turned into a spectacle that would echo through social media for days. The moment Meghan Markle crossed that studio threshold, something shifted. You could feel it, the tension, the unease, the almost electric curiosity in the air. It wasn't just another celebrity appearance. It was an intrusion into sacred territory, and every person in that studio knew it. But let's rewind to those crucial few seconds before everything erupted. The View had gone live. Whoopi Goldberg, with her trademark glasses and calm authority, was guiding a segment about politics and celebrity culture. Joy Behar was laughing at her own joke, the audience clapping along. Everything was running smoothly. Then, from the corner of the studio, a commotion caught the attention of the front row. A camera operator hesitated, unsure whether to pan left. There she was, Meghan Markle, smiling, radiant, poised. Her stride confident, her presence unmistakable. For a split second, the audience didn't know how to react. Some gasped. Others cheered out of instinct. The sound crew's headsets crackled with frantic whispers. Was this a surprise guest? A segment? A publicity stunt? But as Meghan moved closer to the main table, the one reserved exclusively for the show's hosts, the confusion turned into disbelief. It wasn't planned. Not by the producers. Not by ABC. Not by Whoopi Goldberg. You could see it in Whoopi's eyes. She blinked once, twice, then leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. Meghan reached the edge of the table, resting her manicured hand on the back of an empty chair. The energy shifted instantly. Joy Behar, always quick with a quip, stopped mid-sentence. Sunny Hostin, usually composed, exchanged a look with Sarah Haynes that screamed, "What's happening?" No one knew. Not the director, not the crew, and certainly not the audience watching live from their homes. And then came that silence, the kind of silence that weighs heavy, that you can feel pressing against your skin. Meghan tried to fill it with a smile. That famous, carefully practiced, camera-ready smile. But even that couldn't hide the awkwardness of the moment. She looked around, still expecting someone to usher her into a seat or hand her a microphone. Instead, all she got were wide eyes and frozen faces. "Good morning, ladies," she began, her voice smooth but slightly trembling at the edges. "I thought I'd drop by in." And that's when Whoopi cut her off. "You need to step down, sweetheart. This isn't your show." 5 words. Quiet. Firm. Final. The studio froze again. You could hear a pin drop. Meghan blinked, her mouth parting in disbelief. The audience didn't know how to react. Some laughed nervously, others looked horrified. The control room was chaos. "Cut to commercial," someone shouted through a headset. But the cameras kept rolling, if only for a few more seconds that would later be replayed millions of times. Meghan tried to save face. "Oh, Whoopi," she said, letting out a light laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I was just stopping by to say hello." But Whoopi didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't play along. "We love a good hello," she said, her tone calm but sharp. "But next time, make sure it's on the schedule." The audience erupted. Some clapped, others gasped. Meghan's smile faltered. You could almost see the wheels turning in her head, searching for an escape line, a clever retort, anything to defuse the embarrassment. But none came. The producers finally cut to commercial. The music kicked in abruptly. The studio lights dimmed slightly. Meghan was ushered toward the side of the set, her team trying to intervene. But the damage had been done. Let's pause there for a second. What makes this moment so extraordinary isn't just the public embarrassment, it's what it represented. Meghan Markle had built her post-royal identity on control. Every appearance, every interview, every carefully worded sentence was designed to craft an image of poise and empowerment. Yet here, on a live stage she didn't control, the truth slipped through. You can rehearse a speech, but you can't rehearse spontaneity. And when spontaneity arrived, she wasn't ready for it. Whoopi Goldberg, on the other hand, has always thrived in the unscripted. Her authenticity is her weapon. Her silence, her timing, her ability to cut through the noise, all forged from decades of experience in the brutal world of entertainment. So when Meghan stepped onto that stage, believing she could steer the moment in her favor, she misjudged who she was dealing with. Backstage, chaos unfolded. Crew members whispered, producers debated, and PR teams texted furiously. Was it a stunt? A misunderstanding? Or a deliberate attempt by Meghan to force her way into the public conversation again? Some staff claimed Meghan had been lobbying ABC for months to appear on the show, pitching herself as a potential guest collaborator for a future women's empowerment episode. Others said her visit was spontaneous, a last-minute pop-in, meant to surprise Whoopi and reignite media interest. Whatever the truth, the optics were disastrous. Because in the entertainment world, perception is everything. And what the world saw that morning wasn't a confident comeback. It was a woman out of her depth, facing someone she couldn't charm. Think about it. How often do we see two powerful women collide on live television, neither willing to back down? Usually one folds. But Whoopi, she doesn't fold. She sets boundaries with grace. And when she said step down, it wasn't just literal. It was symbolic. A reminder that some spaces can't be seized by force, no matter how famous you are. Meanwhile, on social media, the clips spread like wildfire. By the time the show returned from commercial break, the first hashtags were already trending. Hashtag Whoopi versus Meghan. Hashtag Step Down Sweetheart. Memes, reaction videos, slowed down replays. The internet couldn't get enough. Some praised Whoopi for standing her ground. Others accused her of bullying Meghan on live TV. But beneath all the noise, a quieter realization emerged. Meghan had underestimated how fragile her public goodwill had become. When you've spent years presenting yourself as misunderstood, as the victim of unfair media treatment, even one public misstep can unravel everything. Especially when the person calling you out is universally respected. Whoopi's co-hosts tried to smooth things over during the remainder of the episode. They avoided mentioning Meghan directly, but their unease lingered. Joy Behar joked, "Well, that was an unexpected cameo," trying to lighten the mood. The audience chuckled awkwardly, but everyone knew the tension hadn't dissipated. The producers issued a brief statement to the audience during the next break. "Everything's fine, folks. Let's keep the energy up." But the damage was irreversible. The footage was already out there, and no amount of PR spin could undo what millions had just witnessed, a public clash of two very different kinds of power. Later that day, several crew members would quietly admit they'd never seen anything like it. One staffer allegedly told a journalist, "You could feel the air go out of the room. It was like someone had broken a spell." Another added, "Whoopi handled it like a pro. She didn't raise her voice, didn't lose control. She just stopped it. Right there." And that's what made it sting even more for Meghan. It wasn't loud humiliation, it was quiet authority. Because when someone like Whoopi Goldberg puts you in your place with calm precision, the world doesn't see anger. They see truth. After the episode ended, Meghan reportedly stayed in the building for a few minutes, surrounded by her team. Her publicist argued with producers, claiming the incident had been a misunderstanding. Meghan, meanwhile, was visibly shaken but trying to maintain composure. She made one final attempt to speak with Whoopi backstage, hoping to clarify things privately. But Whoopi had already left. It was over. At least, that's what everyone thought. But humiliation like that doesn't fade quietly, not in the age of viral media. Within hours, international outlets picked up the story. Headlines flashed across screens. Whoopi Goldberg tells Meghan Markle to step down on live TV. Royal rebel meets her match. The View turns into the showdown no one expected. And just like that, Meghan was back in the spotlight, but for all the wrong reasons. Some called it karma. Others said it was a wake-up call. But for Meghan, it felt like betrayal. She had walked into that studio believing she could reclaim the narrative, only to be reminded that control is an illusion when millions are watching live. There's a lesson buried in that moment, one that applies to anyone chasing fame in today's world. You can manufacture attention, but you can't manufacture authenticity. Sooner or later, the curtain falls, and when it does, only truth remains. Still, Meghan wasn't about to disappear quietly. Humiliation, for her, has always been fuel. She's been embarrassed before, dismissed, criticized, torn apart by tabloids. And every time, she's found a way to turn it into another headline. Another chance to reinvent. Another opportunity to fight back. And this time would be no different. Because while Whoopi returned to her seat that day, satisfied that the chaos had passed, Meghan's next move was already forming. Behind the scenes, her team was drafting statements, calling contacts, and planning how to spin the event in her favor. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The View might have been Whoopi's territory, but Meghan Markle was about to start a war of perception. And as she left the building that morning, her jaw tight, her smile fixed, she whispered something to her assistant, something that one insider would later repeat to a reporter. They think this is over. It's not. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. You ever watch someone try to stage the perfect comeback, only to watch it crumble in slow motion? That's what Meghan Markle's plan looked like from the inside. Carefully orchestrated, expensive, ambitious, and yet, fatally flawed from the very beginning. The confrontation with Whoopi Goldberg on live TV wasn't some spontaneous accident. No, that was the final spark in a fire that had been quietly smoldering for months. Because before Meghan ever stepped onto that studio floor, she believed she had finally found her next big move, her redemption arc. After all, in her world, a new media appearance wasn't just a chance to talk. It was a chance to control the narrative again, to flip the script, to make people forget the headlines that had bruised her public image, failed deals, canceled shows, diva rumors, the whispers that Hollywood had stopped calling. And this time, her plan was bold. She wasn't aiming to be interviewed. She wanted to host. Imagine that. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, sitting alongside Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, leading the conversation on one of the most watched talk shows in America. It would have been the ultimate rebranding moment, a shift from ex-royal exile to empowered media voice. A woman who lost her crown, reclaiming it on her own terms. That was the pitch her team fed to the networks. The pitch meetings began quietly. Her representatives reached out to ABC executives in late spring, describing Meghan as an advocate for women, diversity, and modern leadership. The proposal, a limited guest co-host spot on The View to discuss social issues, parenting, and global empathy. The kind of PR-safe language that sounds noble but translates to one thing: visibility. Meghan didn't just want a seat at the table. She wanted the spotlight aimed squarely at her again. But Hollywood, for all its smiles, has a short memory, and an even shorter tolerance for scandal fatigue. Behind closed doors, executives were hesitant. They'd seen what happened at Netflix. Her multi-million-dollar deal that fizzled after lackluster engagement. They'd seen Spotify part ways with her, citing creative differences after one season of her podcast. ABC didn't want controversy. They wanted stability, ratings, and audience trust. And in their eyes, Meghan was risky business. Still, her team persisted. Emails flew back and forth. Meetings were scheduled. Confidential memos hinted that Meghan's people were pressing for a trial appearance. Her manager even offered to cover certain production costs if ABC would consider testing audience response. That's how desperate things had gotten. Meghan's camp offering to pay for exposure. You might think, why would she risk it? Why push for a spot she wasn't wanted in? The answer is simple. She needed relevance more than approval. Because by the time of that incident on The View, her empire was crumbling quietly behind the scenes. Let's take a step back. After her royal exit, Meghan built her entire American comeback on 3 pillars: her marriage, her media deals, and her image as a humanitarian visionary. But by early 2025, each of those pillars had begun to crack. Her marriage to Prince Harry, once her greatest PR shield, had turned into a tabloid soap opera. Their appearances together looked forced, their interviews rehearsed. The public saw through it. Every smile looked strained. Every statement felt scripted. Rumors of disagreements and financial tension started leaking from sources close to the couple. Whether true or not didn't matter. Perception became reality. Then came the media disasters. Netflix quietly shelved her latest documentary pitch, a behind-the-scenes special about powerful women breaking barriers. Insiders said the idea was derivative and lacked originality. Her podcast deal with Spotify, once hailed as revolutionary, ended abruptly after producers complained she was difficult to work with and overly controlling. In short, her empire wasn't falling overnight. It was eroding piece by piece, reputation by reputation. And that's when someone on her PR team proposed what would become her biggest mistake. What if Meghan took a live seat? Something unscripted, something bold. Show the real her. It sounded genius in theory. After years of carefully edited interviews and stiff palace memories, live television could humanize her again. If done right, it could remind the world of the charisma that once made her irresistible. But live television is unpredictable. It demands humility, quick wit, and genuine connection, traits that can't be faked. And when your entire brand is built on control, stepping into a format that thrives on chaos is like walking barefoot into fire. Still, Meghan insisted. She wanted to do it. Her argument, reportedly, was simple. They'll see I belong there. Her team crafted a rollout plan. Her stylist assembled a wardrobe that screamed classy but relatable, neutral tones, soft curls, minimalist jewelry. PR drafts were prepared for release immediately after the show. Meghan Markle returns to American television with poise and grace. There were even mock headlines ready to circulate. She'd walk in, charm the audience, share empowering words, and leave trending for all the right reasons. Only one person wasn't on board with the plan: Whoopi Goldberg. When word of Meghan's request reached her, Whoopi's reaction was reportedly swift. Absolutely not. Those 3 words sent shivers through the production office. Whoopi wasn't just a co-host. She was the show's heartbeat. Nothing moved without her blessing. She wasn't impressed by fame. She respected authenticity. And to her, Meghan represented the opposite: manufactured emotion, curated identity, and a knack for turning sympathy into currency. She's not here for conversation, Whoopi allegedly told producers. She's here for a headline. ABC tried to navigate the situation carefully. They didn't want to anger Whoopi, but they also didn't want to alienate Meghan's massive online following. So, they compromised, or at least thought they did. Meghan would not be announced as a guest or co-host. She could visit the studio privately to discuss future collaboration. No cameras, no live audience interaction, just a quiet behind-the-scenes meet. That was the agreement. But when Meghan arrived that morning, something in her shifted. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the desperate hunger for redemption. Whatever it was, she ignored the plan. Instead of heading backstage to meet producers, she walked straight toward the stage. And the rest, as they say, became viral history. Now here's the twist most people don't know. Meghan's team wasn't entirely blindsided by Whoopi's reaction. In fact, internal emails suggest they anticipated it. They even discussed the optics of a potential on-air confrontation. One strategist allegedly wrote, "If she's shut down, it makes Meghan the victim again. People will sympathize." In other words, humiliation might have been part of the plan. But there's a fine line between controlled controversy and outright disaster. The clip that went viral didn't paint Meghan as misunderstood. It painted her as out of place, overconfident, tone-deaf, and desperate. Even her supporters struggled to defend it. Because when you're told to step down on live TV, it's not just a power check, it's a cultural verdict. Whoopi had said what many had been too polite to say aloud. The public was tired, and that exhaustion spread like wildfire. Talk shows debated whether Meghan's surprise appearance was an act of arrogance or a plea for attention. Late-night hosts cracked jokes. One said, "You know you've crossed the line when Whoopi Goldberg turns into the palace guard." Another quipped, "Even The View needs security clearance now." Behind the humor, though, lay a darker truth. Meghan's credibility was dissolving. ABC officially distanced itself within 24 hours, releasing a short statement. Ms. Markle was not scheduled to appear on The View. "We value respectful collaboration and look forward to future opportunities handled through proper channels." Translation: don't ever do that again. Her team scrambled to control the narrative. They leaked a counter-story, claiming Meghan was invited informally, that it was all a miscommunication. But no one bought it. The clip told the story better than any press release could. And this is where the irony bites hardest. The same woman who once captivated the world with her ability to control every frame of her image had now lost control in the one place she tried to reclaim it. You could almost feel the shift in Hollywood's air after that day. Casting agents who once courted her stopped returning calls. Brand partners reconsidered pending collaborations. Even Netflix, which had quietly kept the door open, went radio silent. No one wanted to touch the fallout. But Meghan didn't see it as a defeat. At least, not yet. In her mind, this was just another setback to spin into a victory later. Because if there's one thing she's mastered, it's survival. And survival, for Meghan, always begins with the next move. As her SUV pulled away from the ABC building that morning, her assistant asked softly, "What now?" Meghan didn't answer right away. She stared out the tinted window, the reflection of skyscrapers passing like judgment. "Finally," she said, "they tried to make me small on live TV. Let's see how they handle the truth when I speak." Her PR team exchanged worried looks. They knew what that meant. Another interview, another carefully crafted narrative. But this time, the world wasn't listening the same way it used to. The sympathy well was drying up. Still, Meghan would try. She always tries. And that's what makes her dangerous. Not her fame, not her titles, but her refusal to quit even when quitting might save her. Because as the cameras stopped rolling and the dust began to settle, Meghan Markle wasn't retreating. She was plotting. And the next step would drag this feud from a studio clash into a full-blown media war. The kind where everyone takes sides. The kind where reputations burn. And the kind where one woman's silence would be far louder than the other's voice. But before that war began, a single phone call set the tone for what was to come. A call made just hours before the show that no one was supposed to know about. And when the truth of that call came out, it would make Whoopi's calm words on live TV look merciful by comparison. Because Meghan's plan hadn't just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. And the fallout was only beginning. There's a moment in every power clash when you realize who truly holds the ground. It's not always the louder voice. It's not always the person with the bigger following or the fancier title. Sometimes, it's the one who simply refuses to flinch. That's Whoopi Goldberg, a woman who stood in front of cameras for over 4 decades, weathered Hollywood politics, survived the fickleness of fame, and built a career out of something Meghan Markle never quite mastered: authenticity. Let's pause for a second and ask a question. Why did Whoopi's calm, 5-word command, "You need to step down, sweetheart," hit so hard? Why did those words, spoken without anger or theatrics, feel like a hammer dropping on marble? The answer isn't just in what she said. It's in who she is. Whoopi Goldberg doesn't bend. She never has. She's a woman forged in fire, comedian, actress, activist, and talk show legend. She's one of the few performers on Earth who's earned an EGOT, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. But it's not the awards that define her. It's the raw truth that she carries in every word, every look, every pause. Whoopi doesn't chase approval. She commands respect. That's a kind of power Meghan never learned to wield. To understand why this moment between them struck such a cultural nerve, you have to go back, way back, to Whoopi's beginnings. Before the TV lights, before the fame, before The View ever existed. She was born Karen Elaine Johnson in New York City, a working-class kid raised by a single mother. She cleaned hotel rooms to survive. She performed in small theaters long before Hollywood noticed her. And through it all, she learned one invaluable truth: the world doesn't owe you applause. That truth shaped everything about her. It made her unshakable, immune to pretension, and allergic to performance for performance's sake. So when Meghan Markle, the Duchess turned celebrity, wrapped in years of calculated media choreography, walked onto her set, Whoopi recognized her type instantly. Not as a threat, but as a test. Whoopi has seen dozens of Meghan Markles before, actors who mistake visibility for respect, charisma for credibility. Hollywood breeds them like orchids, beautiful, delicate, and easily withered by the first hint of real weather. But Whoopi, she's not an orchid. She's oak. And oak doesn't move for a passing storm. It's this distinction, authentic versus manufactured, that made their collision so inevitable. Because Meghan's plan to use The View as a comeback vehicle wasn't just a professional misstep. It was a philosophical one. You can't stage authenticity in front of someone who's built her entire career on being brutally honest. Let's not forget, Whoopi Goldberg's entire life has been one long fight against being controlled by others. When she broke into comedy, producers told her to change her name, her hair, her accent. She refused. When Hollywood tried to box her into roles that fit stereotypes, she smashed the mold, playing characters that made audiences rethink what a black woman could be on screen. Even her transition to The View wasn't about fame. It was about truth-telling. She's been called controversial, unfiltered, even difficult. But she's never been called fake. And in Whoopi's world, that's the highest compliment you can get. Now imagine being Meghan, stepping into that space. A woman whose entire post-royal image has been carefully curated, rehearsed, and filtered through layers of PR polish. On paper, the two should have been allies, two women breaking barriers, defying systems, and redefining what it means to have a voice. But real life isn't a press release, and Whoopi Goldberg doesn't play roles she didn't write. When Meghan approached The View, it wasn't just ambition, it was intrusion. She wasn't invited into that world. She tried to take it. Whoopi, sitting at that table she'd earned through decades of grit, wasn't about to let someone parachute into her territory for clout. Not out of spite, but out of principle. To her, that table represents something sacred. Women earning their place, not demanding it. There's a difference between invitation and entitlement, and Whoopi knows it. So when she looked Meghan in the eyes and told her to step down, it wasn't cruelty. It was correction. A lesson from one generation of women to another about how respect is earned. Let's rewind a bit further, though, because Whoopi's calm authority didn't appear overnight. It was built through battles far fiercer than a TV spat. She's faced racism, sexism, and career setbacks that would have broken most people. In the 1980s, when Hollywood wasn't exactly welcoming to outspoken black women, she carved out space for herself anyway. Her first one-woman show, staged in a tiny theater, became an underground hit. From there, Steven Spielberg cast her in The Color Purple, a role that would change her life forever. But success didn't make her soft. It made her sharper. Through the years, she's clashed with network executives, sparred with politicians, and even endured public backlash for refusing to toe the line on sensitive issues. But here's the thing. She never apologized for having her own mind. And that's why The View has always revolved around her center of gravity. She's not the loudest, but she's the anchor. That's what Meghan didn't understand. The View isn't just a talk show. It's a battleground for perspective. The women at that table aren't performing friendship. They're negotiating space. Each has fought to sit there. So when Meghan walked in unannounced, assuming her star power was enough, she unknowingly challenged the unwritten hierarchy. And in that hierarchy, Whoopi sits firmly at the top. Now, if you're wondering how Whoopi felt after that live confrontation, surprisingly, she didn't gloat. She didn't tweet about it, didn't talk about it in interviews, didn't even acknowledge it beyond a single offhand comment days later. You don't just walk into someone's kitchen and start cooking. That's classic Whoopi. Metaphor sharp enough to draw blood without even raising her voice. But behind that restraint was something deeper. Whoopi wasn't angry. She was disappointed. Disappointed that Meghan, someone who could have used her platform to genuinely uplift others, had instead fallen into the trap of self-mythologizing. Because to Whoopi, the moment you start believing your own PR, you've lost touch with the truth. And if you've ever watched Whoopi handle conflict on The View, you'll notice a pattern. She doesn't escalate, she deflates. When debates get heated, she leans back, listens, then delivers a single sentence that cuts through the noise. She's surgical with her words. So when she told Meghan to step down, it wasn't an attack, it was precision, a quiet enforcement of reality. But why did it resonate so powerfully with the public? Because in an era where celebrity culture thrives on spin and emotional manipulation, Whoopi's honesty felt refreshing. People are tired of manufactured vulnerability. They crave something real. And Whoopi, in that moment, gave it to them. Even those who sympathized with Meghan had to admit, it was a wake-up call. You can't buy authenticity. You can't rehearse humility. And when you try to force yourself into spaces that aren't ready to receive you, the universe has a way of pushing back. Sometimes gently. Sometimes with a 5-word sentence that the whole world hears. Let's not forget, though, that Whoopi's moral compass hasn't always made her popular. She's been criticized, misunderstood, and even canceled more than once. But each time, she stood her ground and outlasted the outrage. Why? Because authenticity has a longer shelf life than performance. People might not always agree with her, but they trust that she means what she says. And in today's culture, that's currency Meghan doesn't have. Now, think about how this dynamic must have felt in real time. Whoopi sitting calmly, Meghan standing awkwardly, trying to recover her composure. One woman radiating experience, the other radiating discomfort. One grounded in decades of earned wisdom, the other grasping at borrowed authority. It wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a clash of philosophies. The veteran versus the strategist. The truth-teller versus the brand builder. And here's the irony. Meghan probably thought Whoopi would embrace her. She likely saw her as an ally, another strong woman in media who'd understand her struggle against scrutiny. But Whoopi doesn't align out of sympathy, she aligns out of integrity. And integrity, to her, means telling uncomfortable truths even when the world prefers lies. That's why she's lasted this long. That's why audiences still tune in after all these years. Not to see her perform, but to see her be. She represents a kind of grounded strength that feels almost extinct in the age of filters and algorithms. And that's exactly why Meghan's entrance felt so out of place. It wasn't just a physical intrusion, it was a symbolic one. A clash between the real and the constructed. But Whoopi didn't just win that moment on camera. She won it in silence. In the days following the confrontation, while Meghan's PR machine scrambled to spin the story, Whoopi stayed quiet. No interviews. No statements. No participation in the noise. That silence, deliberate and steady, spoke louder than any press release could. It told the world, I don't need to explain myself. You saw what you saw. And people respected that. Even those who disliked her tone admitted that she handled it with grace. The absence of defensiveness made her victory even cleaner. While Meghan fought to reclaim control, Whoopi simply moved on. That's the difference between someone playing the long game and someone caught in the short one. Still, behind Whoopi's composure was something only a few insiders caught onto. There was a sense of sadness. Not because she regretted what she said, but because she recognized what it revealed, a deeper truth about the state of fame today. She once said in a previous interview, the problem now is everyone wants to be seen, not heard. They want to trend, not teach. And in Meghan's case, that quote suddenly rang prophetic. Because Meghan's attempt to insert herself into The View wasn't about conversation, it was about visibility. But visibility without credibility is emptiness wrapped in light. And Whoopi, of all people, knows how dangerous that emptiness can be. The day after the confrontation, Whoopi arrived at the studio as usual. Calm. Professional. No trace of drama. When a producer nervously asked if she was okay, she reportedly replied, "Why wouldn't I be? I told the truth." That's Whoopi in a nutshell. No panic. No regret. Just forward motion. But while she moved on, the world hadn't. The clip was still trending. Comment sections were ablaze. Industry voices chimed in. One entertainment columnist wrote, Whoopi didn't just defend her show, she defended authenticity itself. Another noted, it's rare to see someone stand so calmly in their power. Meghan misread the room. Whoopi was the room. And that's the essence of it. Whoopi Goldberg didn't humiliate Meghan Markle that day. She exposed the fragility of performance in a space that rewards truth. But Meghan wasn't done yet. Humiliation has a way of hardening resolve. And as Whoopi leaned back into her usual rhythm, Meghan was already preparing her counterattack, a move that would involve backroom calls, leaked conversations, and a showdown that would push this quiet conflict into full public spectacle. Because for Meghan, retreat wasn't an option. If she couldn't own the stage, she'd own the story. And it all started with one phone call. A call made hours before that fateful taping. One that would soon leak to the press, changing everything we thought we knew about what really happened behind those studio walls. The kind of call that could turn quiet authority into open warfare. And when that recording surfaced, the world would realize the calm before the storm was about to end. Because Whoopi may not bend, but Meghan was about to break. Before the bright lights, before the frozen smiles, before Whoopi Goldberg said those fateful words, there was a phone call. A single, seemingly routine call that would set the entire confrontation in motion. No one in the audience that morning knew about it. No one watching from home had any idea that a conversation hours earlier had already sealed Meghan Markle's fate. But those who were there, behind the scenes, would later say that everything that happened live on The View had been inevitable from the moment that call ended. It began at 6:47 a.m. The studio crew was just getting ready for another day. Coffee cups clattered, teleprompters blinked to life, and producers ran through the schedule. Whoopi was reviewing her notes for the day's topics, a heated segment on celebrity accountability, a lighter one on a viral parenting trend, and then a political interview scheduled for later. Nothing unusual, nothing hinting at the chaos that would follow. Then the call came through. It wasn't Whoopi who answered. It was an executive producer named Linda Carver, a seasoned industry veteran known for her no-nonsense demeanor. The number flashing on her phone was unfamiliar, but the name attached made her sit up straight. It was Meghan Markle's publicist. "Good morning, Linda," came the polished, cheerful voice on the other end. "I hope you're well. Meghan just wanted to touch base before today's show." Linda frowned. Before the show? Why would Meghan Markle be calling me before the show? She flipped through her rundown sheet, confused. Meghan wasn't listed as a guest, and certainly not as a host. The publicist continued, smooth as silk. "She's in New York for a few meetings, and thought it would be a lovely surprise to stop by and say hello. You know, reconnect with Whoopi, discuss some ideas about women in media." Meghan's such a huge admirer of the show. Linda's pen froze mid-scribble. She'd been in television long enough to recognize PR code when she heard it. This wasn't a courtesy call. It was a soft attempt to secure airtime. She replied carefully, "We appreciate the enthusiasm, but today's show is fully booked. If Meghan wants to discuss a future collaboration, she'll need to go through ABC's formal process." The publicist's tone shifted just slightly, still friendly, but more insistent. "Oh, I understand, of course. But it's not really a segment, just a friendly drop-in. The audience would love it. Meghan and Whoopi together, two strong women talking about empowerment. It's a moment waiting to happen." Linda had heard that line 1,000 times. A friendly drop-in always turned into a headline-grabbing stunt. She glanced at the clock. They were already behind schedule. She sighed, "I'll have to check with Whoopi and the team." There was a pause. Then the publicist added quietly, "Meghan's already on her way." And that's when the first alarm bell rang. At that exact moment, miles away, Meghan Markle was being chauffeured through Manhattan in a black SUV, her team in tow. She was dressed immaculately, white blazer, crisp trousers, soft gold jewelry that caught the morning light. Every detail had been chosen with purpose. The publicist sitting beside her scrolled through her phone, updating social media trackers, monitoring trending tags. Meghan, meanwhile, stared out the window, rehearsing her words under her breath. "They'll see I belong there," she murmured. Her assistant nodded nervously. "You're sure Whoopi knows?" Meghan smiled faintly. "She will when I walk in." Back at the studio, Linda immediately called Whoopi. The line barely rang once before Whoopi's voice came through, calm and clipped. "Yeah, what's up?" Linda didn't sugarcoat it. "Whoopi, Meghan Markle's on her way here. Her people say she wants to drop by." Silence. Then a sigh. "Drop by? As in here? Today? On live TV?" "That's what they said. I tried to stall, but apparently she's already en route." Whoopi let out a low chuckle, the kind that isn't amused, it's warning. "Linda, you know me. I don't do surprise visits. Not from politicians, not from movie stars, and definitely not from duchesses. Linda nodded, even though Whoopi couldn't see her. I figured as much. Should I tell security? Just let her in. Whoopi interrupted, voice steady. Let her walk right in. But make sure the cameras are rolling. That last sentence would later become legendary. Because Whoopi wasn't planning drama. She was planning truth. She'd seen this pattern too many times before. A celebrity trying to hijack authenticity for their own PR resurrection. But Whoopi knew something Meghan didn't. Truth doesn't need to be staged. It reveals itself naturally if you just give it space. Meanwhile, as Meghan's SUV pulled up to the ABC building, her team went into full motion. Assistants checked lighting conditions. One staffer whispered to her, "Remember, smile when you enter, like you're home." Another adjusted her hair, murmuring, "This is your moment." And that was the problem. They believed it. Inside, a production assistant rushed to brief the crew. "We've got a situation," he whispered. "She's here. Meghan Markle." Unannounced. The sound engineer swore under his breath. The camera operators exchanged glances. Someone muttered, "This better not be another PR circus." The doors opened. Meghan entered with that familiar glow of confidence, the kind she wore like armor. She waved politely to the receptionist, nodded at a few startled staff members, and headed straight toward the main stage. Backstage, Whoopi adjusted her earpiece and looked over at Joy Behar, who was cracking up at her phone. "What's funny?" Whoopi asked. "Someone just texted me," Joy said, grinning. "Apparently, Meghan Markle's trying to get on our show." Can you imagine? Whoopi's expression didn't change. "Yeah," she said slowly. "I can imagine." Moments later, Linda appeared beside her. "She's in the building," she whispered. Security asked if you want her escorted out. Whoopi shook her head. "No, let her come. But I'll handle it." And that's what made the entire incident so surreal. Whoopi wasn't angry. She wasn't even irritated. She was calm, almost curious, like someone watching a chess game unfold exactly as predicted. As Meghan approached the studio entrance, she glanced at her reflection in a glass panel. For a second, her mask slipped. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Then she straightened her posture and stepped through the door. Inside the control room, the producers were losing their minds. "Is this live? Is she seriously doing this live?" One of them shouted. "Cut her mic if she speaks," another barked. "We don't have clearance." But by the time anyone could react, she was already halfway to the stage. And there it was, the moment caught forever on camera. The stride, the smile, the calm defiance. The call that morning had set this entire domino line tumbling, and not even Meghan herself could stop it now. Later, reports would surface claiming that during that call, Meghan's publicist had hinted she was in discussions with ABC for an upcoming collaboration. Insiders say the line was a bluff. There were no negotiations, no meetings, just ambition disguised as inevitability. They believed if Meghan appeared confident enough, if she acted like she already belonged, no one would dare challenge her. It had worked before, why wouldn't it work now? But Whoopi Goldberg wasn't just anyone. She was the immovable object Meghan's unstoppable ego had just collided with. And here's the part that makes this phone call even more fascinating. Whoopi had made one of her own that same morning. Minutes after hanging up with Linda, she called her old friend and co-producer, Mike Larrabee. "Hey," she said, voice low. "Heads up, we're about to have a visitor." He laughed. "Who? Oprah? Beyoncé?" "Worse," Whoopi replied. "Someone who thinks she's both." Mike groaned. "You want me to cancel the segment?" "No," Whoopi said. "Let's keep everything exactly the same. No changes. No adjustments. If she walks in, let the cameras roll. I want people to see what happens when the performance meets reality." And that's exactly what the world saw. That one decision, to let things play out, unfiltered, was Whoopi's masterstroke. Because she knew the truth doesn't need editing. It needs exposure. And by letting Meghan walk into her own unscripted reality, Whoopi ensured that this wouldn't just be a television moment. It would be a revelation. After the broadcast, that phone call became a legend in itself. Staff whispered about it in the hallways. Producers joked that ABC should frame the transcript. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Meghan's PR team scrambled to delete every trace of the email that started it all. But leaks have a way of surviving. Within days, an anonymous insider released fragments of the call transcript to a media outlet. It revealed the publicist's insistent tone, the casual overconfidence, the strategic wording, phrases like Meghan's spontaneous charm, an organic on-air connection, and reclaiming narrative through presence. The world read those words and saw right through them. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was manipulation, dressed as opportunity. And the irony? Meghan's own attempt to appear authentic had exposed how meticulously choreographed everything around her was. But what the transcript didn't show, what no one outside that studio knew, was that Whoopi had been prepared for this moment long before the call even happened. She had sensed it coming. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was experience. But she knew that sooner or later, someone like Meghan would walk into her world, expecting applause, and instead meet reality. The phone call was just the trigger. And as the days unfolded, as clips went viral and stories spun out of control, that one morning conversation became the invisible thread connecting every event that followed. The calm before the storm, the spark before the explosion. Because Meghan thought she was stepping into an opportunity. In truth, she was walking straight into a reckoning. And when the next leak surfaced, the one that revealed what happened backstage after that call, her image would suffer a blow that no PR agency could spin away. Because behind the glamour, behind the poise, behind the smiles, Meghan's composure was about to crack. And when it did, the world would finally see the part she tried hardest to hide. The moment when Meghan Markle, for the first time in her public life, lost control completely. And it all started with a phone call. It wasn't chance. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't even arrogance, not entirely. Meghan Markle's entrance onto the View stage that morning was deliberate, every step rehearsed, every smile measured, every glance planned. What millions of viewers saw as a shocking surprise was, in Meghan's mind, the climax of a perfectly executed comeback moment. She believed she was walking into her redemption. What she didn't know was that she was walking into a storm she couldn't control. Picture it. The studio is alive with chatter and energy. The lights are warm, the cameras hum, the co-hosts banter effortlessly. And then the doors open. A pause, just long enough for people to turn. And there she is, Meghan Markle. White tailored blazer, gold earrings glinting under the spotlights, a small but deliberate smile that says, "I belong here." But belonging, in Whoopi Goldberg's world, is something you earn, not something you announce. As Meghan's heels clicked against the studio floor, every sound seemed amplified. A few in the audience clapped instinctively, confused but intrigued. Others fell silent, unsure whether this was part of the show or a break in the script. The host's eyes darted to the control room. Was this planned? Was it a surprise guest? Joy Behar's smile faltered for half a second. Sunny Hostin's eyebrows rose. Sarah Haynes mouthed the word "what" to a producer off camera. Meanwhile, Whoopi didn't move. She stayed seated, her gaze fixed, unblinking. Meghan approached the table like a performer hitting her mark. You could almost see the mental script running through her head. Walk in gracefully. Maintain composure. Radiate confidence. She knew that body language was half the battle in any PR moment, and she'd mastered it years ago. Shoulders back, chin up, the soft practiced wave that looked both regal and approachable. To her, this was a power play. She wasn't barging in. She was taking back her narrative. For months, the media had painted her as desperate, out of touch, irrelevant. But this moment would change that, she thought. This was the Meghan Markle the world would talk about again. The unbothered, graceful Duchess turned visionary, walking onto one of America's most respected talk shows to remind everyone she still mattered. But she made one fatal mistake. She believed she was the star of the moment. Whoopi Goldberg believed otherwise. There's something eerie about watching confidence collide with authority. The studio's energy shifted the second Meghan reached the table. She placed a manicured hand on the back of an empty chair, Whoopi's chair, as fate would have it. That tiny gesture, subtle to most, screamed volumes in the language of television hierarchy. Meghan wasn't just visiting. She was attempting to take space that wasn't hers. Whoopi raised her eyes slowly, expression unreadable. She let the silence hang. Not anger, not shock, just a pause long enough for Meghan to feel it. "Good morning," Meghan said, her voice smooth and pleasant, but pitched higher than usual. "I thought I'd drop by and say hello to some extraordinary women." The audience hesitated, unsure whether to clap or stay quiet. Joy Behar tried to fill the gap with humor. "Well, that's certainly one way to make an entrance," she quipped, half laughing, half cringing. Meghan smiled wider, tilting her head slightly, as if she were in on the joke. "Oh, you know me," she said. "I love connecting with strong women and powerful voices. And there's no table more iconic than this one." Whoopi didn't smile. She just leaned forward, resting her hands on the table, eyes locked on Meghan. "You need to step down, sweetheart. This isn't your show." The air cracked. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but devastatingly final. The studio froze. Meghan blinked, then laughed softly, as if it were all in good fun. "Oh, Whoopi, I'm not taking over," she said, still trying to regain rhythm. "I just wanted to say hello, maybe join in on."